The air at Belle Rêve was a thick, sweet poison. It clung to the lungs, a perfume of night-blooming jasmine and the cloying scent of sugarcane sweating under the Louisiana sun. For Alara and Isabelle Beaumont, identical in every outward measure, this air was the very essence of their existence, beautiful, suffocating, and inescapable. From the grand veranda of their father's house, they looked out upon a world that was entirely theirs, and yet not at all. The manicured gardens, the whitewashed outbuildings, the distant fields shimmering in the heat. It was all Beaumont land, a kingdom built on cotton, sugar, and the silent, unending labor of others. They were 17 perfect porcelain dolls cast from the same mold. They shared the same deep auburn hair that fell in soft ringlets, the same eyes the color of moss after a storm, and the same pale complexion that their father, Monsieur Beaumont, guarded as fiercely as he guarded his ledgers. But there, the similarities ended. Alara possessed a stillness, a watchful quality that made her seem older. She saw Belle Rêve not as a home, but as a chessboard, and she spent her days studying the placement of every piece, calculating the threats and opportunities. Her needlepoint was precise, her French flawless, her smile a carefully constructed defense. Isabelle, by contrast, was a creature of impulse and romantic fervor. She felt the world with a painful intensity. The music she played on the pianoforte was not merely practiced. It was a torrent of emotion that she could not otherwise express. She saw Belle Rêve as a tragic opera, and she was its captive heroine, dreaming of a love that could transcend the suffocating sweetness of the jasmine-scented air. And then there was Samuel. He was a blacksmith, a man of fire and iron, whose workshop stood near the great oaks that dripped with Spanish moss. He was not like the other hands. There was an economy to his movements, a quiet intelligence in his dark eyes that seemed to absorb everything and reveal nothing. When he hammered steel, it was not with brute force, but with a rhythm that was almost musical, a powerful and steady heartbeat in the center of the plantation's oppressive silence. The sisters' fascination with him had begun years ago, a silent, shared secret. They would find excuses to walk past the smithy, drawn by the percussive clang of his hammer, and the sight of him, his skin gleaming with sweat in the forge's glow. He was a forbidden world, a symbol of a strength and autonomy they could not imagine for themselves. Their father, a man whose moods were as volatile as a summer squall, saw Samuel as nothing more than his most valuable asset. "The man can mend any plow and shoe any horse," Monsieur Beaumont would boom to his guests. "And he is strong, a fine specimen." He spoke of Samuel as one would speak of a prized bull, his words a constant, chilling reminder of the chasm that separated their worlds. But the sisters saw something else. They saw the way he gentled a spooked mare, the careful way he mended a child's broken toy, the flicker of a smile he would share with Delphine, the head housekeeper who had raised them since their mother's passing. They saw a man, and in the gilded cage of Belle Rêve, seeing a man where you were supposed to see property was the most dangerous transgression of all. One sweltering afternoon, as a storm gathered on the horizon, Isabelle stood on the veranda, her hands clenched on the railing. She had just endured another of her father's lectures on the importance of a strategic marriage, a union that would consolidate land and influence. He had a name in mind, a wealthy Creole planter from upriver, a man of 40, with a cruel mouth and grasping hands. Tears of helpless frustration welled in Isabelle's eyes. Alara came to stand beside her, her presence a silent comfort. "I cannot marry him, Alara," Isabelle whispered, her voice trembling. "I would sooner throw myself in the Mississippi." Alara looked not at her sister but out towards the smithy, where Samuel was securing the shutters against the coming wind. His movements were calm and efficient, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in her sister's heart and in the sky above. "There are always other options," Alara said, her voice low and steady. But the thought that sparked in her mind was so radical, so perilous, it stole the breath from her lungs. Isabelle followed her gaze. Her own hopeless, romantic dreams had long centered on the blacksmith, a fantasy she knew was a fool's errand. "What options?" she asked, a note of bitter despair in her tone. "For us, there is only duty. A cage with silk lining is still a cage." Alara's eyes narrowed, the calculating part of her mind already moving the pieces on the board. She saw her sister's despair, her father's ambition, and the quiet, dignified presence of the man at the forge. An idea began to form, an impossible, monstrous, and yet undeniably compelling solution. A secret pact that could either save them or destroy them all. "Perhaps," Alara said, turning to face her identical twin, her moss-green eyes holding a new, dangerous light. "Perhaps we do not need to escape the cage. Perhaps we only need to find a way to live within it, on our own terms." The first roll of thunder echoed in the distance, a prelude to the storm that was about to break, not just over the fields of Bel Rev, but within the hearts of its captive daughters. In the weeks that followed, a new language developed between the twins, a silent dialect woven into the fabric of their daily lives. It was a language of shared glances across the dinner table, of books left open to specific pages, of pianoforte melodies that spoke of longing and resolve. They were two halves of a single thought, moving toward a conclusion so unthinkable that it could not yet be spoken aloud. Their shared focus was Samuel. They observed him with an intensity that bordered on worship. They noted the subtle shift in his posture when the overseer, a thin, whey-faced man named Finch, was near. They saw the weariness in his shoulders at the end of a long day, and the rare, unguarded moments of peace when he would sit by his cabin, carving small figures from scraps of wood. Isabel's romantic heart translated these observations into poetry she dared not write down. For her, Samuel was a captive prince, a man of noble spirit trapped in a cruel world. Her love was a high, fragile thing, a beautiful and painful ache. She imagined secret conversations, daring rescues, a world where the rules of their society simply melted away. Alara's perspective was far more grounded, and therefore far more dangerous. She saw the same noble spirit, but she also saw the immense risk he represented. Her affection was a fiercely protective fire, a strategist's desire to shield a vital piece from capture. She saw the system that oppressed him and sought to find the cracks within it, the loopholes that could be exploited. Where Isabel dreamed of escape, Alara planned for survival. The catalyst came one evening during a stiflingly formal dinner party. Monsieur Beaumont was holding court, his voice booming as he bragged about a recent land acquisition. The suitor he had chosen for Isabel, Monsieur Dubois, was there. He was a man who seemed to ooze a sweet, sickly cologne, his eyes lingering on Isabel with an owner's appraisal. Isabel felt a wave of nausea. She caught Alara's eye from across the table, a desperate plea. At that moment, a servant entered, his hands trembling, to announce that a carriage axle had broken on the muddy drive. "Samuel!" Beaumont roared, snapping his fingers. "Send for Samuel. He will fix it." A short while later, Samuel was brought to the side veranda, where the men had gathered with their cigars and brandy. He was quiet, his eyes downcast, but his presence seemed to fill the space. He listened intently as Beaumont described the problem, his words dismissive and impatient. "The iron has sheared clean through," Dubois opined, swirling his brandy. "It will require a master's touch." He looked at Samuel, a smirk playing on his lips. "Do you have the skill for such a delicate repair, boy?" Samuel did not flinch. He simply looked at the axle, then back at his master. "I will need the forge," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble. It was the first time the sisters had heard him speak at such length. His voice was calm, devoid of the fear they saw in so many others. As he was led away, Dubois chuckled. "He has a certain confidence. One must be careful with that in his kind." Isabel felt a tremor of rage. She watched Samuel's retreating back, his posture straight and proud even in subservience. She looked at Dubois' smug face and her father's oblivious pride, and a cold certainty settled over her. She would rather perish than belong to this world, to this man. Later that night, long after the last guest had departed, the sisters sat in their shared bedroom. The air was thick with the scent of wilted flowers and unspoken fears. Isabel was pacing, a caged tiger, her silk dressing gown whispering against the floorboards. "He is a pig, Alara, a preening, cruel pig, and father would hand me to him as if I were a broodmare." Alara was seated at the window, staring out at the moonlit grounds. The light of the forge was still visible, a distant pulsing glow. Samuel was still at work, I know, Ilara said softly. I cannot do it, Isabel whispered, finally stopping her pacing. Her shoulders slumped. My heart, it belongs elsewhere, even if it is a fantasy, even if it is madness. Ilara turned from the window. The moment had arrived. The unspoken had to be given voice. It is only madness if you are alone in it, she said, her gaze steady and intense. Isabel looked at her, confused. What do you mean? I see him too, Isabel, Ilara confessed, her voice barely a whisper. I see his strength. I see his honor. I feel a pull, just as you do. The admission hung in the air between them, a shocking and liberating truth. For years they had thought their fascination was a solitary secret, a private shame. To know it was shared changed everything. Isabel sank onto the bed, her eyes wide. You too? Ilara nodded. But my feeling is not like yours. Yours is a fire that could consume you. Mine is a desire to protect that fire, to shield the candle from the wind. She took a deep breath, the final pieces of her audacious plan clicking into place. Father wants one of his daughters to marry, to secure a dynasty. He cares not which one, only that the Beaumont name is allied with the Dubois fortune. But he has chosen me, Isabel cried. He has chosen the daughter he believes to be the more pliable, the more romantic, Ilara corrected. He would not waste a dreamer on a business transaction if he had a more practical option. He mistakes my silence for obedience. She rose and came to sit beside her sister, taking Isabel's trembling hands in her own. You cannot marry Dubois, but you also cannot have Samuel. Not in this world. The laws of God and man forbid it. Then I have nothing, Isabel wept. No, Ilara said, her grip tightening. We have each other, and we have a secret. What if we were to make a different kind of marriage? A secret one, a pact. Isabel looked up, her tear-filled eyes searching her sister's face. A pact? What are you saying? I am saying, Ilara leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, that if we cannot each have him, and we cannot bear to live without him, then perhaps we can share him. We can build a secret life, a hidden world right here at Bel Rêve. We will be his wives, in our hearts and in the shadows. Both of us. A secret pact, our own sacred vow, against this entire world. The words were monstrous, a blasphemy against everything they had ever been taught. But in Isabel's desperate heart, they sounded like salvation. The forge glowed a defiant orange against the deep velvet of the Louisiana night. Inside, Samuel worked the bellows, sending a shower of embers into the darkness. The broken axle lay on the anvil, a patient beast awaiting his command. For him, the forge was a sanctuary. Here, the clang of hammer on steel drowned out the whispers of the overseer and the demands of the great house. Here, he was not just property. He was a creator, a master of an element as wild and untamable as his own spirit. He was acutely aware of the Beaumont twins. He had been for years. He saw them as two sides of the same rare coin, one bright and gleaming with unshed tears, the other cool and watchful, its value hidden. He saw their gazes linger on him, and he understood the danger in it. A danger as potent as the white-hot steel he shaped. It was a foolish fancy, a game played by bored girls in a gilded cage. Yet, he could not deny the flicker of something genuine he saw in their eyes, a recognition of his humanity that he starved for. Up in the great house, the sisters were forging a pact of their own. Ilara's proposition had shocked the air from the room, leaving Isabel breathless. Share him? Isabel repeated, the words feeling alien on her tongue. Like a doll? A plaything? The romantic in her recoiled at the crudeness of the thought. No, Ilara insisted, her voice firm. Not as a plaything, as a husband, in spirit, if not in law. Think of it, Isabel. We are identical. No one can tell us apart unless we wish them to. We could create a life, a schedule. He would have 2 guardians, 2 protectors. We would have a reason to live, a purpose beyond marrying some pig like Dubois. But him, Samuel, what would he think? Isabel asked, her mind struggling to grasp the logistics of such a deception. We cannot simply decide this for him. He is a man, not a prize to be divided. We would approach him, Ilara explained, her plan already fully formed. Carefully, we would let him know he has allies in this house. We would offer him what we can: protection, kindness, a measure of affection that is honest and true, even if it must be hidden. It is more than he has now, and it is more than we have. The audacity of it was terrifying, but the alternative, a life with Dubois for Isabel, a loveless, strategic marriage for Ilara, and a lifetime of silent longing for them both, was a slow death. The pact was a wild, desperate leap into the unknown, a rebellion of the heart. How? Isabel asked, her voice now a whisper of conspiracy rather than shock. How could we possibly manage such a thing? Ilara's mind, always steps ahead, laid out the framework. Delphine will be our key. She loves us, and she trusts him. She can carry messages. She can create distractions. The old sugar mill at the edge of the property, the one abandoned since the fire. It will be our meeting place. It is secluded, forgotten. She detailed a system of signals. A blue ribbon tied to the balcony railing would mean a meeting was requested. A specific piece of music played on the pianoforte, a somber Chopin nocturne, would serve as a warning of danger, of their father's foul mood or the overseer's proximity. And we will trade places, Ilara continued, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the scheme. Sometimes you will be the one with the headache that requires you to retire early. Sometimes it will be me. We will use our sameness, the very thing that makes us feel invisible, as our greatest weapon. They talked for hours as the moon arced across the sky. They spoke of the risks, of the terrible consequences of discovery. For them, it would mean ruin, shame, disownment. For Samuel, it would mean a punishment too horrific to name, a fate worse than death. This knowledge sobered them, binding them together not just in a shared affection, but in a shared, terrifying responsibility. By the time the first hint of dawn painted the eastern sky a pale, bruised purple, the pact was sealed. It was a vow made not before an altar, but in the hushed secrecy of their bedroom. They would be one wife with two bodies, a single entity dedicated to a secret love. Isabel, her heart soaring with a dangerous romantic hope, felt a sense of purpose she had never known. She was no longer a victim of her fate. She was an author of it. Ilara, ever the pragmatist, felt the cold weight of their decision. She was setting in motion a series of events that she could not predict or control. She was gambling with 3 lives, and the stakes were absolute. She looked at her sister, saw the renewed light in her eyes, and knew there was no turning back. They had stepped off a cliff, hand in hand, trusting that they would somehow learn to fly before they hit the ground. Down at the forge, Samuel finally laid down his hammer. The axle was repaired, stronger than it had been before. He wiped the sweat from his brow and looked towards the great house, now silent and dark. He felt an inexplicable sense of being watched, a strange new current in the thick Louisiana air. He did not know it yet, but in the quiet hours before the dawn, his world had been irrevocably changed. 2 women had secretly and impossibly declared themselves his wives. The implementation of the pact began with a delicate and perilous first step: making contact. For 2 days, the sisters debated the method. A direct note was too risky. A verbal message sent through a servant was unthinkable. It was Ilara who devised the opening move, a gesture that was both innocent and deeply symbolic. She knew Samuel often repaired the small tools for the garden staff. With calculated intent, she accidentally broke the handle of her favorite rose shears, a beautiful pair with inlaid mother-of-pearl. She took them not to the overseer, but to Delphine. "My shears slipped from my hand," Ilara explained, her voice a mask of calm regret. "Could you ask Samuel if he might be able to mend them? I'm so very fond of them." Delphine, a woman whose wisdom was etched in the lines around her eyes, looked from the broken shears to the girl's steady gaze. She had seen the way the twins watched the blacksmith. She had seen it for years. She took the shears without a word, her expression unreadable. When Delphine delivered the tool to Samuel, she added a quiet message of her own. "Miss Ilara is very particular about these. She says she trusts only your hands to fix them properly." Samuel took the shears, feeling the cool smoothness of the mother of pearl. It was a lady's tool, delicate and fine. He understood the unspoken message. This was not a routine repair. This was a test, a signal. He worked on them that evening, taking his time, mending the handle with a precision that bordered on artistry. When he was finished, the repair was almost invisible, the wood sanded and oiled until it was seamless. But before he considered the job done, he did something more. With the fine point of a heated awl, he burned a tiny, almost imperceptible image into the underside of the wooden handle. 2 intertwined vines, so small they could be mistaken for a natural grain in the wood. It was his answer, a sign of connection, a risk. When Delphine returned the shears to Alara, she placed them in her hand and held her gaze for a long moment. "He is a careful man," the housekeeper said, her voice low. "He makes things whole again." Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. She turned the shears over in her hand and her fingers brushed against the tiny, intricate carving. 2 vines intertwined, her and Isabel. She felt a dizzying mix of terror and triumph. The first message had been sent and received. The next step fell to Isabel. According to their plan, her romantic nature made her the natural choice for the first meeting. That evening, as the family sat for dinner, Isabel feigned a sudden, splitting headache, a common enough complaint in the oppressive heat. She excused herself, pressing a handkerchief to her temple, and retreated to her room. Monsieur Beaumont barely grunted his acknowledgement, more concerned with the price of cotton than his daughter's health. Alara covered for her, expressing sisterly concern and promising to look in on her later. Once in her room, Isabel shed her dinner dress and pulled on a simple, dark-colored frock. Her hands trembled as she tied the laces on her boots. Every floorboard creak, every distant shout from the fields sounded like an alarm. She waited for what felt like an eternity, her ear pressed to the door, until she heard the family retire for the night. Then, with a deep breath, she slipped out through the garden door, a ghost in the moonlight. The abandoned sugar mill stood at the far edge of the property, a skeletal silhouette against the starry sky. The air inside was cool and damp, smelling of old molasses and decay. It was a place of ghosts, a monument to a past enterprise. She waited in the shadows, her heart a frantic drum. Doubts assailed her. What if he didn't come? What if this was a terrible mistake? She was about to lose her nerve and flee back to the house when a figure materialized in the doorway. It was Samuel. He moved with a silence that was startling for a man of his size. He did not speak immediately, but stood there, letting his eyes adjust to the gloom, his presence filling the derelict space with a palpable tension. "Miss Isabel," he said finally. His voice was even lower, more resonant here than it had been on the veranda. It was the first time he had ever addressed her by name. "Samuel," she breathed, stepping out of the shadows. "Thank you for coming. I know the risk." "The risk is great," he said, his tone not accusatory, but a simple statement of fact. "For both of us. But more for me." "I know," she whispered, taking a hesitant step closer. In the dim light, she could see the cautious intelligence in his eyes. This was not the romantic hero of her daydreams. This was a real man, wary and watchful. "My shears, the carving, a vine needs something to hold to," he said, his gaze unwavering, "or it grows along the ground." The simple poetry of his words undid her. This was not just a blacksmith. This was a man with a soul that had not been crushed by his circumstances. Tears welled in her eyes. "We are all growing along the ground here, Samuel." Impulsively, she reached out and took his hand. His skin was calloused and warm, his hand strong and solid. The contact was like a lightning strike, a jolt of reality that was more powerful than any fantasy. She felt the rigid tension in him, the ingrained discipline of a man who could never, ever let down his guard. "Why did you ask me here?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm, not pulling his hand away but not returning the gesture either. "Because I am to be married to a man I despise," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Because my sister and I, we see you, we see your goodness, and we cannot bear the thought of this life we are meant to lead." It was a clumsy, childish confession, and she instantly regretted it. She was putting her foolish, privileged sorrows onto a man whose burdens were infinitely greater. But Samuel did not mock her. He simply nodded, his expression softening with a hint of understanding. He knew of Dubois. He knew of the way of things on a plantation. He looked at the young woman before him, her face pale with earnest emotion in the moonlight, and he felt a stir of something he had long suppressed, a dangerous, fragile pity. "Be careful, Miss Isabel," he said, his voice low and resonant. "Some things once broken cannot be mended, not even by the best blacksmith in Louisiana." He gently withdrew his hand, and for a moment, Isabel felt the cold reality of their situation rush back in. But then he gave her the slightest of nods, a silent acknowledgement of their shared secret, their shared risk. He turned and melted back into the night, leaving Isabel alone in the ruins, her heart trembling with a terrifying, exhilarating mix of fear and hope. The first thread of their secret life had been successfully woven. 2 nights later, it was Ilara's turn. Her approach was born not of romantic impulse, but of strategic necessity. If their pact was to survive, Samuel needed to understand that he was dealing with 2 distinct individuals, 2 different sets of strengths and expectations. He needed to know that Ilara was not just a mirror image of her sister, but the architect of their shared rebellion. This time, the signal was different. After dinner, Ilara went to the pianoforte. Instead of the light, airy pieces their father preferred, she played a deep, melancholic sonata. It was a piece she and Isabel had often used to signal their own private griefs or frustrations. Now, it was a summons. The mournful notes drifted out of the parlor windows, across the manicured lawns, and into the humid night air, a coded message of sorrow and intent. Like her sister, she slipped out of the house under the cloak of darkness, her movements more practiced and silent than Isabel's had been. When she entered the sugar mill, she did not wait in the shadows. She stood in the center of the floor, a shaft of moonlight from a hole in the roof illuminating her like an actress on a stage. She was calm, her hands clasped before her, her posture radiating a quiet authority. When Samuel arrived, he saw her immediately. The same face, the same dress, but an entirely different presence. Where Isabel had been a trembling, emotional girl, Ilara was a woman carved from marble. "Samuel," she said, her voice clear and steady. There was no tremor of fear in it. "Miss Ilara," he responded, his own voice holding a note of caution. This was the one he had identified as the watcher, the planner. "My sister told me of your meeting," Ilara began, dispensing with pleasantries. "She said you warned her of the danger." "The danger is real," he affirmed. "A word from the wrong person, a glance held too long. That is all it would take." "I am aware of the risks," Ilara said, her tone sharp with intelligence. "I have calculated them. I have also calculated the alternative, which is a kind of death in itself, for all 3 of us." Samuel was silent, studying her. He had seen this strength in her from a distance, but up close it was formidable. "What is it you want from me?" he asked, his question blunt. He was not a man for games. "Isabel wants a soul to connect with, a heart to dream of," Ilara stated plainly. "She offers you her sincere and deep affection. It is a pure, if perhaps naive thing." She took a step closer, her moss-green eyes locked on his. "I offer you something more practical. I offer you an alliance." He raised an eyebrow. "An alliance? I am not my sister. I do not dream of escaping Belrave. I intend to learn how to control it. My father is not a fool, but his passions rule him. His pride, his temper. I am his daughter. I know how to navigate his moods, how to plant ideas in his mind that he will later believe are his own. I can protect you in ways Isabel cannot." She laid out her proposition with the cold clarity of a general outlining a battle plan. "I can ensure you are given tasks that keep you away from the overseer's eye. I can speak up for better rations for the forge, citing the importance of your work. I can be your eyes and ears in the great house. In return, you will be our confidant. You will be the keeper of the secret that gives my sister and me the will to endure this place. You will be our husband. In this secret world we are building, you will be the center of it. Isabel will give you her heart. I will give you my mind and my protection. We will be your wives." The word hung in the dusty air between them. Wives. It was the most insane, blasphemous thing he had ever heard. A rich white woman, two of them, proposing this to him. A man who was legally chattel. A man who could be sold, beaten, or killed on a whim. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it left him speechless. He saw the trap, of course. This was a fantasy woven by two privileged, desperate women. But he also saw the opportunity, an alliance, protection, eyes and ears in the house of his enslaver. It was a foolish, deadly gamble, but his entire life was a gamble. Every sunrise brought with it a new set of risks. "And what do I give you?" he asked, his voice a low rasp. "In this arrangement, your loyalty," Ilara answered without hesitation. "Your discretion and your honesty. You will not play one of us against the other. We are two halves of a whole. You must be husband to the entity we have created. Can you do that?" He looked at her, at this strange, fierce, intelligent woman who looked exactly like the trembling romantic he had met 2 nights before. He thought of the intertwined vines he had carved. This was what they represented. A bond, a shared root system, a way of surviving in hostile soil. He was being invited into that bond. He did not smile, but a new light entered his eyes, a flicker of calculation, of interest, of a shared conspiracy. "Your terms are clear," he said slowly. He extended his calloused, powerful hand. "My loyalty and my discretion are all I truly own. You have them." Ilara took his hand. Her grip was firm, her skin cool. It was not the trembling, electric touch of Isabel. It was a handshake sealing a pact, a contract. A secret marriage of minds had just been consummated in the ruins of the sugar mill. Samuel now had 2 wives, one for the poetry of survival and one for the prose. Life at Belle Rêve settled into a new, secret rhythm. The pact, once a whispered conspiracy in a darkened room, was now a living, breathing entity, its tendrils weaving through the daily routines of the plantation. The deception was a constant, humming tension beneath the surface of their lives, a third party in the sisters' relationship that demanded meticulous attention. Ilara's strategic mind was the loom upon which they wove their tapestry of lies. She created a complex schedule, a dance of feigned illnesses, sudden interests in botany that required long walks near the woods, and newfound passions for solitary reading in secluded garden gazebos. They became masters of the subtle art of disappearance. Delphine was the silent weaver who made it all possible. She never spoke of the arrangement, but her complicity was absolute. She would appear with a cool compress for a headache that allowed one sister to remain in her room while the other slipped away. She would misplace a garden tool near the smithy, creating a plausible reason for a brief, supervised exchange of words. Her presence was a silent, watchful blessing. Her loyalty, a shield. The meetings in the old sugar mill became their hidden sanctuary. The sisters were careful never to go together, preserving the illusion that only one of them held the secret. Isabel's time with Samuel was filled with a hushed, romantic intensity. She would read to him from books of poetry she smuggled out of the house, her voice soft in the dusty air. She told him of her dreams, of a world beyond Belle Rêve. With her, Samuel was a patient listener, a quiet, reassuring presence. He spoke little of his own past, but he would share small things, a story of his mother, who taught him the names of the stars, a memory of the way the river sounded at night. He was the calm anchor for her turbulent emotions. Ilara's meetings were entirely different. They were councils of war. She brought him information gleaned from her father's conversations, whispers of financial trouble for a neighboring plantation, news of patroller routes, discussions of which crops were failing and which were succeeding. She saw him not as a romantic hero, but as a partner in a dangerous enterprise. "Finch is watching the stores more closely," she would report, her voice low and urgent. "My father is concerned about pilfering. Be careful." With Ilara, Samuel was more open about the practicalities of his life. He spoke of the needs of the people in the quarters, the lack of medicine, the quiet acts of resistance that happened every day. He recognized that her brand of affection was rooted in a fierce, protective pragmatism, and he met it with a pragmatism of his own. He was not just their shared secret. He was the leader of his own hidden community, and Alara's intelligence was a valuable asset. The strain of the deception was immense. The sisters had to coordinate their knowledge, sharing every detail of their conversations with Samuel to maintain a seamless front. He told me his mother called the North Star the drinking gourd, Isabel would whisper to Alara late at night. He told me that the axle on the Westfield wagon is about to fail and that Finch refuses to listen. Ilara would report back. They were a single wife, sharing a single pool of knowledge about their husband. But tiny cracks began to appear, born of jealousy. Isabel, who gave Samuel her poetry and her tears, sometimes felt a pang of envy at the practical, important matters he discussed with Ilara. Ilara, who risked so much to provide him with protection and information, occasionally felt a sting of resentment when she heard of the tender, gentle moments he shared with her sister. One afternoon, a near disaster rattled them all. Isabel was returning from the sugar mill, her heart full from a stolen conversation with Samuel. She took a shortcut through a grove of pecan trees and nearly walked directly into the path of the overseer, Finch. He was a man whose presence was like a cold draft. His eyes, small and colorless, missed nothing. "Miss Isabel," he said, tipping his sweat-stained hat. His gaze lingered for a second too long. "You are a long way from the house. Your headache must be much improved." Isabel's blood ran cold. He had seen her leaving dinner the night before. "The fresh air is a balm," she managed to say, her voice miraculously steady. "I was just admiring the trees." "They are fine trees," Finch said, his eyes scanning the path behind her, towards the sugar mill. "But it is best to stay close to the house. The woods can be unpredictable." The veiled threat was unmistakable. Isabel hurried back to the house, her heart pounding. She flew to the pianoforte and struck the chords of the Chopin Nocturne, their signal of danger. The incident terrified them, but it also reinforced the necessity of their caution. They became even more meticulous, their silent language more nuanced. A hairpin placed on the right side of the mantel meant the grounds were clear. On the left, it meant Finch was prowling. The deception was no longer just a romantic game or a strategic alliance. It was a razor's edge upon which all three of them walked every single day. Their secret marriage was a fragile, beautiful thing, existing in a world determined to shatter it. Mr. Finch was a man who thrived on order and fear. He viewed Belle Reve not as a community or a home, but as a machine, and his job was to ensure all its cogs and gears, particularly the human ones, moved according to his will. He possessed a weasel's cunning and a deep-seated resentment for the Beaumonts' casual privilege. He especially disliked Samuel. The blacksmith's quiet dignity and the respect he commanded from the other enslaved people felt like a challenge to Finch's authority. The overseer began to notice anomalies, tiny inconsistencies that pricked at his suspicious nature. He saw that Samuel was now receiving slightly better cuts of iron, a request approved by Monsieur Beaumont after a casual, well-reasoned remark from Alara about the longevity of the tools. He noticed that Delphine seemed to hover protectively whenever the twins were near the smithy. But most of all, he noticed the change in the twins themselves. They had always been quiet and reserved, but now there was a new layer to their silence, a tension he could almost taste. Their sudden alternating illnesses and solitary walks seemed coordinated, and their identical nature, which most people found charming, began to seem like a tool for obfuscation. Which one had he seen near the pecan grove? He had called her Isabel, but was he certain? His gaze fell upon Samuel with renewed predatory focus. He started inventing reasons to visit the smithy, watching the blacksmith work, trying to catch him in a moment of error or insubordination. "The master wants this plow blade reshaped," Finch would say, tossing a piece of iron onto the dirt floor. "And he wants it by sundown." The demands were often unreasonable, designed to test and to break him. Samuel would simply nod, his face an impassive mask, and turn to the forge. He never gave Finch the satisfaction of a complaint or a weary sigh. This infuriated the overseer more than any open defiance could have. One afternoon, Finch set a trap. He knew Samuel sometimes did small private jobs for others in the quarters after his official work was done, mending a pot, forging a new hook. This was technically forbidden, a use of the master's time and resources. Finch hid himself in the shadows behind a stack of curing lumber, waiting. He watched as a young woman named Sarah approached the smithy, carrying a small dented tin cup. She spoke to Samuel in a low voice, and he took the cup, gesturing for her to wait. As Samuel heated the metal and gently hammered out the dent, Finch crept closer. Suddenly a sharp, piercing whistle cut through the air. It was a signal from one of the children posted as a lookout. Samuel didn't even flinch. He handed the cup back to Sarah, said a quiet word, and she scurried away just as Finch chose to step out from his hiding place. "A busy man, I see," Finch said, his voice slick with false congeniality. "Even after the day's work is done." Samuel turned from the cooling forge. "Just tidying my tools, Mr. Finch," he said, his voice level. Finch's eyes darted around the smithy, looking for the cup, for any evidence of the transgression, but there was nothing. Sarah had vanished. He was left with nothing but his own curdling suspicion. "See that you do," Finch sneered. "The master does not pay for you to run a private enterprise." The incident was a warning to Samuel and, by extension, to the sisters. Ilara had heard of Finch's trap from Delphine, who heard it whispered from the cook, who had it from Sarah's mother. The plantation had its own communication network, one far more efficient than Monsieur Beaumont could ever imagine. During their next meeting at the sugar mill, Ilara was tense. "He is hunting," she told Samuel. "He is looking for any reason to bring you down, and if he brings you down, he will bring us down with you." "I know," Samuel said, his face grim in the moonlight. "He smells something, but he does not know what it is. He is like a hound that has lost the scent but still remembers the chase." The pressure was mounting. Finch's constant, hovering presence cast a long shadow over their secret world. The sisters found themselves starting at every unexpected footstep, scrutinizing every word from the overseer. The gilded cage had developed a new, terrifying feature, the constant, unwavering gaze of a predator who was waiting patiently for them to make a single mistake. Their pact was no longer just about love and survival. It was now a desperate battle of wits against a man who had made it his personal mission to destroy them. Just as the pressure from Finch's scrutiny was becoming unbearable, the other threat, the one that had catalyzed the pact in the first place, materialized on the grand drive of Belle Rêve. A fine carriage, pulled by two magnificent gray horses, rolled to a stop before the main house. Out stepped Monsieur Armand Dubois. He was exactly as they remembered, a man in his 40s, impeccably dressed, with a soft physique that bespoke a life of leisure, and a smile that never quite reached his cold, assessing eyes. He had come to formally begin his courtship of Isabelle. Monsieur Beaumont was ecstatic. He welcomed Dubois with booming laughter and backslapping camaraderie, parading him through the parlor as if displaying a prize-winning pig. "A union between our families will be the talk of Baton Rouge," Beaumont declared, pouring 2 large glasses of bourbon. For the sisters, Dubois' arrival was like a death knell. The hypothetical threat was now a flesh-and-blood reality, sleeping in their finest guest room and sitting at their dinner table. Isabelle was forced to play the part of the demure, blushing maiden. She sat with Dubois in the parlor, her hands clenched in her lap, as he spoke of his vast sugar cane fields and the efficiency of his new mill. He directed all his conversation to her, but his gaze would slide over her as if she were a piece of property he was appraising, noting the quality of her skin, the thickness of her hair, the delicacy of her hands. "You are a quiet one, mademoiselle," he said one afternoon, his knee brushing against hers. "I find that a most restful quality in a woman." Isabelle felt a wave of revulsion so strong she thought she might be sick. She murmured something about the heat and fled to the veranda, gasping for air. Ilara watched it all with a cold, simmering fury. She was forced to play the supportive sister, to sit nearby with her needlepoint and offer polite smiles. Each one of Dubois' condescending remarks to Isabelle was a barb that struck her own heart. This man was the embodiment of everything they were fighting against: the casual ownership, the assumption of compliance, the utter disregard for their inner lives. The suitor's presence threw their secret schedule into chaos. It was impossible for Isabelle to feign a headache every night. She was expected to be present, to be charming, to be won. The meetings with Samuel became more infrequent, more dangerous, and fraught with a new, desperate tension. The news of the courtship spread quickly through the plantation's invisible channels. Samuel heard it from the stable boy who tended to Dubois' horses. The knowledge landed like a stone in his gut. He had known, intellectually, that this was part of the sisters' reality. But hearing it, knowing that man was in the great house, touching Isabel's hand, planning her future, his future, ignited a feeling he could not afford to have, a deep, possessive anger. During a brief, hurried meeting at the mill, the strain was palpable. Isabel was frantic, her words tumbling out in a panicked rush. "He wants to take me for a ride along the river tomorrow. Father has already approved it. He touches my arm, Ilara, and I feel my skin crawl." She corrected herself, her mind so intertwined with her sister's that she forgot who she was in that moment. "He touches my arm." Samuel stood in the shadows, his fists clenched. He was a blacksmith. He could shatter bone and bend iron. But he was powerless against this man, who could destroy him with a single word. The injustice of it was a bitter, metallic taste in his mouth. "You must endure it," Ilara said, her voice tight. She was there in Isabel's place, relaying messages, but she felt the panic as if it were her own. "You must be sweet and pliable. The more he believes he has won you, the less he will be watching." "I cannot," Isabel's message continued through Ilara. "I feel like I am betraying him. I feel like I am betraying us." "We are not betraying anything," Ilara insisted. Her words meant as much for Samuel as for her sister. "This is a battle, and in a battle we use camouflage. Isabel's compliance is our camouflage." But the logic, as sound as it was, did little to soothe the raw emotions. A new and potent poison had been introduced into their secret marriage. The venom of jealousy, not between the sisters, but directed outward at a world that sought to tear them apart. Dubois was not just a suitor, he was a siege engine at the gates of their hidden sanctuary, and every polite smile and demure nod was a stone crumbling from their defenses. The prolonged presence of Monsieur Dubois acted like a corrosive agent on the delicate bond between the sisters. The pact, forged in unity, began to show its first hairline fractures under the immense pressure. The strain was most visible in Isabel. Forced to spend her days smiling at Dubois, listening to his pompous pronouncements, and enduring his proprietary touches, her romantic spirit began to curdle into a bitter resentment. She felt tainted, a traitor to the secret vows she had taken in the sugar mill. This feeling manifested as a sharp, newfound irritation with her sister. "It's easy for you," she hissed at Ilara one night in the privacy of their room. They had just returned from a painfully long dinner where Dubois had presented Isabel with a gaudy pearl necklace. The necklace now lay on the dresser like a coiled snake. You get to meet him in the mill and talk of strategy and resistance. I have to sit and listen to that man describe his new method for boiling sugar while he mentally calculates my dowry. "I am the one on the front lines of this war, and I am the one directing the troops," Ilara countered, her voice low and tight. She was exhausted from the constant vigilance, from managing the signals and covering for Isabel's increasingly erratic moods. "Do you think it is easy for me to watch him look at you that way? To see you flinch when he touches your hand and know that I am the one who must smile and pretend everything is perfect? You are the actress, Isabel, but I am the playwright, the director, and the stagehand all at once." "Some stagehand," Isabel scoffed, her jealousy making her cruel. "While I am fending off that toad, you are the one who gets to speak to Samuel of important things, of his life, of his mind. I am just the foolish girl who reads him poetry. You are his partner. I am his dalliance." The accusation struck Ilara with the force of a physical blow. It was an unjust, untrue sentiment, but it touched upon a tiny secret insecurity in her own heart. Did Samuel view her as the stoic, unfeeling strategist and Isabel as the true object of his affection? "That is a monstrous thing to say," Ilara whispered, her composure finally cracking. "Everything I do is to protect you, to protect us. This pact was my creation, born from a desire to save you from Dubois. Do not dare to throw my efforts back in my face as a betrayal." "You created a pact where I am the sacrificial lamb," Isabel cried, her voice rising. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. They both froze, their argument instantly extinguished by a wave of shared terror. They held their breath, listening. It was only Delphine making her final rounds, but the warning was clear. Their anger was a luxury they could not afford. A raised voice, an unguarded word, could bring their entire world crashing down. The fight left a scar. A chill settled between them, a space created by unspoken resentments. They continued the deception, but the seamless unity was gone. Now, there was a slight hesitation before one answered for the other, a flicker of doubt in their shared gaze. The discord traveled, as all things did, to Samuel. He felt it in the way Isabel, when she could meet him, was now prone to fits of tears and frustration, questioning his affection for her sister. He felt it in the new hard edge to Ilara's voice, her strategic updates now laced with a weary impatience. He found himself in an impossible position. He cared for them both, in different but equally profound ways. He admired Isabel's passion and her goodness, the light she brought into the suffocating darkness of his world. He respected Ilara's fierce intellect and her courage, the shield she provided him. He was husband to them both, and his two wives were now at war with each other. During a rare meeting with Ilara, he broke his own rule of silent compliance. "She is suffering," he said, his voice a low rumble in the darkness of the mill. "We are all suffering," Ilara snapped back, her patience worn thin. "Her suffering is different," Samuel insisted. "She is out there, alone with him. You are her sister. She needs your strength, not your logic right now." Ilara looked away, stung by the criticism, by the truth in his words. She had been so focused on the mechanics of their survival that she had forgotten the emotional toll, especially on her more fragile sister. The crack between them was not just their own doing. It was a wound being pried open by the world outside, and if they did not mend it, it would split them apart and swallow all three of them whole. Their pact of unity had become a source of division, and their secret marriage was teetering on the brink of collapse. The discord between the sisters festered, creating a dangerous vulnerability in their defenses. An argument over a misplaced ribbon, a sharp word about the choice of music. These small skirmishes were symptoms of the deeper fracture. Samuel felt the chill emanating from the great house, and knew that the pact, his only lifeline of hope and humanity in this place, was in jeopardy. He had to intervene. He could no longer be a passive participant in the arrangement they had created. He had to make a choice, not between them, but for them. He chose his moment with care. He knew from Delphine that Monsieur Beaumont and Dubois were riding to a neighboring plantation to inspect a new piece of equipment and would be gone for the entire afternoon. He also knew that Isabel, pleading another headache after a particularly grueling evening, had secluded herself in her room, while Ilara was taking refuge in the garden gazebo. He requested a moment with Delphine, a rare and risky move. "I need to fix the latch on the gazebo door," he said, his voice low and steady. "It is rusting through. A matter of safety." Delphine looked at him, her wise eyes understanding his true intent. She simply nodded. "See that you do. Miss Ilara is fond of that spot." When Samuel approached the gazebo, Ilara looked up from her book, her face a mask of weary tension. The sight of him, walking in broad daylight towards her sanctuary, sent a jolt of panic through her. "What are you doing?" she hissed, her eyes darting towards the main house. "This is reckless. Recklessness is letting your house fall down because you are afraid to inspect the foundations," he said, his voice calm but firm. He carried a small toolbox, the perfect cover. He began to inspect the door's hinges, his back to the house, creating a pocket of privacy. "You and your sister are destroying what you built." Ilara's jaw tightened. "That is our concern." "No, Miss Ilara," he said, turning to face her, his gaze direct and unflinching. "It is mine as well. You made me a party to this pact. You made me a husband. A husband does not stand by while his family tears itself apart." The word family struck Ilara. It was what they had tried to create, a tiny, secret family of three against the world. "You do not understand," Ilara said, her voice dropping. "She thinks I have the better part of the bargain. She thinks you and I—" She trailed off, unable to voice the accusation. "She thinks I share my mind with you and my heart with her," Samuel finished for her, showing he understood perfectly. "And you? What do you think? That I see you only as a strategist? A shield? He set down his tools and took a step closer. Let me tell you what I see. I see a woman who was willing to risk everything, not for a romantic dream, but for her sister's survival. I see a mind so sharp it could cut through the hypocrisy of this whole world. Do you believe that kind of courage does not capture a man's heart? Your sister's love is a beautiful, warm light. Yours is the fire that keeps the darkness at bay. I need both the light and the fire. I will not choose between them. His words were a balm on her frayed, anxious soul. He was not just an object of their affection or a partner in their scheme. He was an active, feeling participant who saw them, truly saw them, for who they were. You are two bodies, but you made a vow to be one wife, he continued, his voice passionate but low. But you have forgotten that. You are letting Dubois and your father split you back into two. You must be whole again, or we are all lost. He paused, his gaze intense. She is in her room, feeling alone and betrayed. You are out here, feeling angry and unappreciated. Go to her, not as the strategist, but as her other half. Remind her that you are one soul. It is the only way. He picked up his tools, his work on the latch complete. The foundation is strong, he said, giving her a look of profound meaning. Do not let the storm wash it away. He turned and walked away, his posture straight and purposeful, leaving Alara alone in the gazebo with his words echoing in the quiet air. He had given her not an order, but a choice. He had asserted his own place in their pact, not as a possession to be shared, but as a husband demanding unity from his family. He had forced her to see beyond her own resentment and to remember the love that had started it all. Alara closed her book. He was right. She had been so consumed with winning the war that she had been willing to sacrifice her most important soldier, her bond with her sister. She stood up and walked with a new resolve towards the great house, not to lecture or to strategize, but to mend the crack in their shared soul. Alara found Isabel by the window in their room, staring out at the oppressive perfection of the gardens, the pearl necklace from Dubois sitting untouched on her vanity. Isabel didn't turn when Alara entered. If you've come to tell me to be stronger, Alara, please save your breath, she said, her voice flat and lifeless. Alara came to stand beside her. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then she reached out and gently took her sister's hand. No, she said softly. I came to say that I am sorry. I have been so focused on the moves of the game that I have not seen the toll it has taken on you. On us. Isabel finally turned, her eyes wide with surprise. An apology was not a weapon Alara often wielded. I have been unfair, Isabel admitted, her own anger dissolving in the face of her sister's sincerity. I am jealous, not of you, but of what you represent in this pact. Strength, purpose. I feel like I am only weakness. Your heart is not a weakness, Isabel, Alara insisted, her voice fierce. It is the entire reason we are doing this. It is the flag our army marches under. I am just the one who reads the maps. She squeezed her sister's hand. Samuel reminded me of that. The mention of his name, of his wisdom, sealed the truce between them. They were united once more, their shared purpose renewed, their bond mended and made stronger by the strain it had endured. That night, feeling the strength of their reunited front, Alara decided it was time to share a secret of her own, a piece of information from Samuel that she had previously withheld, deeming it too dangerous. She had wanted to protect Isabel from this knowledge, but now she understood that true protection meant shared trust, not secrets. During one of their recent meetings, Samuel had revealed something extraordinary to Alara. He was not just a blacksmith. He was part of a hidden network that stretched across the parishes of Louisiana. And he was literate. Years ago, the previous plantation owner, a more lenient man than Beaumont, had a son who took an interest in Samuel's bright mind. The boy had secretly taught him to read and write before being sent off to school in the north. It was a skill Samuel had guarded more closely than his own life. He used this skill for more than his own enlightenment. In a hollowed-out section of wall behind the forge's fireplace, hidden under a loose stone, was his most precious and dangerous possession, a small, crude printing press. It was made of scavenged parts, a broken cotton press, carved wooden blocks for letters, It was a slow, laborious machine, but it was a weapon. On this press, Samuel and a few other trusted individuals printed simple, single-sheet newsletters. They contained information that was life and death to their community, news of slave patrols, stories of successful escapes from other plantations, warnings about particularly cruel overseers, and coded messages of hope and resistance from the north, smuggled in by sympathetic riverboat workers. They were called the Echo because they were a voice in a world that demanded their silence. "He prints them?" Isabel breathed, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe as Ilara relayed the secret in a hushed whisper. "Here? At Belle Reve? Once a month on the new moon when the night is darkest," Ilara explained. "It is the real reason he sometimes needs more oil, more rags, not just for the forge, for the press." This revelation transformed their understanding of Samuel completely. He was not just a victim of their world, a man they were trying to protect with their limited power. He was an active, courageous agent of change, a leader in a secret war they hadn't even known was being fought. Their pact, their secret marriage, was not just a personal rebellion. They were, unknowingly, allied with a much larger cause. "He is fighting for more than just himself," Isabel whispered, a profound respect dawning in her eyes. "He is fighting for everyone." The knowledge was terrifying. If Finch or their father ever discovered the press, it would not just be the end for Samuel, it would be the end for everyone he worked with. But the fear was overshadowed by a deep, swelling pride. The man they loved, their secret husband, was a hero. The secret press gave their own struggle a new and deeper meaning. They were no longer just two girls hiding a forbidden love. They were now guardians of a revolutionary secret. Their efforts to protect Samuel were now efforts to protect the Echo, to protect the small flame of resistance he was keeping alive in the suffocating darkness of Belle Reve. Their pact had become part of something far bigger than they could have ever imagined. The reconciliation between the sisters brought a renewed sense of calm and purpose to their deception, but it was the calm at the eye of a hurricane. The forces arrayed against them were closing in. Finch, thwarted in his attempts to catch Samuel in a minor transgression, took a different approach. He began to plant seeds of doubt in the mind of a far more powerful and dangerous man. Monsieur Beaumont. Finch knew Beaumont's vanities. He knew his pride, his explosive temper, and his obsession with absolute control over his domain. "It is not my place, sir," Finch began one evening, his voice a study in false humility as he stood with Beaumont on the veranda. "But the blacksmith, Samuel, he has a certain air about him lately." "An air?" Beaumont grunted, swirling the brandy in his glass. "What foolishness is this?" "A confidence, sir. A lack of proper deference." The other hands, they look to him. They listen to him. It is quiet, but it is there. It feels as if his influence is growing, and it is not an influence that stems from a healthy fear of the lash. This was a masterful stroke. Finch was not accusing Samuel of a specific crime, which would require proof. He was instead attacking Beaumont's greatest fear, a loss of authority, a rebellion simmering just beneath his notice. Beaumont's eyes narrowed. "I will not have my authority questioned, Finch. Not by you, and certainly not by him." "Of course not, sir," Finch said smoothly. "It is merely an observation. And another thing, your daughters. They seem to have taken an unusual interest in the workings of the forge. Miss Ilara, questioning me about the quality of the coal. Miss Isabel, asking Delphine about the blacksmith's meals. It is peculiar." The seed was planted. Beaumont, his pride pricked, began to watch. He was not looking for an affair. Such a thought was so far beyond the realm of possibility in his mind that it was laughable. He was looking for insubordination. He was looking for a challenge to his power. He started making unpredictable appearances at the smithy, trying to catch Samuel off guard. He would inspect the tools with a critical eye, questioning the pace of the work. Samuel met each inspection with quiet, respectful efficiency, his face a mask of impassive servitude. But his flawless performance only frustrated Beaumont further, making him feel as if the blacksmith were mocking him with his own competence. The tension on the plantation grew thick and acrid. One afternoon, a young field hand fumbled and dropped a crate of tools. In a fit of temper, fueled by Finch's whispers and his own growing paranoia, Beaumont exploded. He ordered the boy to be punished, not for the minor accident, but as an object lesson. He made all the hands gather, forcing them to watch as the boy was subjected to the overseer's cruelty. The sisters were in the house, but they heard the sounds, the terrible rhythmic slap and the boy's cries. Isabel covered her ears, tears streaming down her face. Ilara stood by the window, her face pale and rigid, forcing herself to watch, to bear witness. She saw Samuel, standing with the other men, his face carved from stone, his fists clenched at his sides. He was powerless to intervene, and in his stillness, Ilara saw a rage that mirrored her own. This act of casual brutality was a message from her father, a reassertion of his absolute power. It was a reminder of the stakes, of the horrific violence that underpinned their beautiful home. He did not suspect their secret, but his suspicion had found a different outlet, and an innocent boy was paying the price. That night, there was no meeting at the mill. It was too dangerous. The entire plantation was shrouded in a pall of fear and sorrow. The sisters sat in their room, the silence between them heavy with what they had heard. The pact, their secret love, their connection to Samuel's rebellion. It all felt fragile and foolish in the face of their father's monstrous, unpredictable power. He was a sleeping dragon, and Finch had succeeded in poking him awake. Finch knew he was close. The atmosphere of fear that Beaumont had created was a tool for him, loosening tongues and sharpening eyes. He had put a watch on the old sugar mill, suspecting it was a meeting place for runaways or thieves, but his men had found nothing. The sisters were too careful. Samuel was too disciplined. Finch needed something concrete, a piece of evidence that would connect the threads of his suspicion into an undeniable rope. He found it by accident. He was making a late-night round near the slave quarters, a thing he rarely did, hoping to catch someone out of their cabin. As he passed near Samuel's small, tidy dwelling, his eye caught a flicker of white in the moonlight, snagged on a splintered board near the doorway. He bent down and picked it up. It was a lady's handkerchief, finely made of lawn cotton, with a delicate lace border. And in the corner, embroidered with exquisite skill, were the initials I.B. Finch's heart began to beat with a hunter's thrill. Isabel Beaumont. He held the small piece of cloth in his hand. It was the key. It was the proof that linked the great house to the slave quarters in a way that was utterly forbidden. He didn't know the whole story. The idea of both twins being involved was still beyond his imagination, but he didn't need to. This was enough. This was the weapon he needed to destroy the proud blacksmith and to ingratiate himself further with the master. The handkerchief was Isabel's. She had dropped it during her last hurried meeting with Samuel a week prior. It had been a gift from Ilara, a small token to offer comfort after a particularly difficult day with Dubois. In her haste and emotional turmoil, she had not noticed its loss. A single careless mistake. That was all it took. Finch did not hesitate. He did not wait for morning. He walked directly to the great house, his stride purposeful, the handkerchief clutched in his fist. He knocked on the heavy oak door of Monsieur Beaumont's study, a room few dared to approach after dark. Beaumont was inside, going over his ledgers. He was in a foul mood, the numbers not adding up to his satisfaction. He opened the door with a snarl. "What is it, Finch? This had better be important." "It is, sir," Finch said, his voice imbued with a grim solemnity. He held out his hand and unfurled his fingers, revealing the small white square of cloth. "I found this, on the doorstep of the blacksmith's cabin." Beaumont snatched the handkerchief. He held it up to the lamplight, his eyes tracing the fine lace, his thumb rubbing over the embroidered initials. His face, already ruddy with brandy, darkened to a deep, dangerous crimson. He recognized the fine handiwork. He had purchased a set of these for his daughters on a trip to New Orleans. He looked from the initials to Finch's face, a terrible, dawning comprehension in his eyes. The confidence Finch had spoken of. The girl's strange interest in the forge. It all coalesced in his mind into a single, monstrous, unthinkable betrayal. The transgression was not one of mere insubordination. It was a defilement of his property, his name, his blood. "Isabel," he breathed, the name a curse. "It would seem so, sir," Finch said, barely concealing the triumph in his voice. Beaumont's hand crumpled the handkerchief into a tight ball. For a long moment, he was utterly still, a statue of pure white-hot fury. The silence in the room was more terrifying than any shout. Then he turned his eyes back to Finch, and his voice was a low, chilling whisper, colder and deadlier than any roar. "Get 4 men. Bring him to the old oaks. Chain him. Now." He pointed a trembling finger towards the ceiling. "And send Delphine to fetch my daughters. Both of them. They will have a front-row seat for the lesson on what happens to those who betray the name of Beaumont." The betrayal was complete. Not by the sisters, not by Samuel, but by a simple dropped piece of cloth and a man whose heart was filled with envy and malice. The secret world they had so carefully constructed was about to be burned to the ground. Delphine's face was a stony, unreadable mask when she appeared at the sisters' bedroom door. The single, sharp rap had jolted them from a fitful sleep. "Your father wants you," she said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. "In the parlor, now." A cold dread seized them. They knew, with a sickening certainty, that this was not a late-night lecture. This was the end. They dressed in silence, their movements stiff with fear, and descended the grand staircase. Monsieur Beaumont was waiting for them. He stood before the cold fireplace, his back ramrod straight, his hands clenched behind him. The air in the room was thick with a violence that was worse than shouting. He did not speak until they were both standing before him. Then he opened his hand. The crumpled handkerchief fell onto the polished mahogany table between them. Isabel gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as she recognized it. Ilara's face went white, but her expression remained unnervingly calm, her mind already racing, searching for a non-existent escape route. "This," Beaumont began, his voice a low, guttural snarl, "was found on the doorstep of your property, your thing. The blacksmith." He spat the word like poison. "It has your initials on it, Isabel. Explain it." Isabel began to tremble, tears welling in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, to lie, to invent some story, but no words came out. She was paralyzed by terror. She stammered. "I must have dropped it. I was—" "Do not lie to me," he roared, his control finally shattering. He slammed his fist on the table, making the crystal lamps rattle. "You have defiled this family. You have shamed my name with filth." It was then that Ilara stepped forward, placing herself slightly in front of her sister. Her voice, when she spoke, was shockingly steady. "It was not her, father. It was me." Beaumont and Isabel both stared at her, stunned into silence. "The handkerchief is mine," Ilara continued, her words cool and precise. "Isabel and I share everything. You know that. I was the one who went to him. I was curious about his work. I asked him foolish questions. I dropped it by accident. Isabel has done nothing. She is innocent. Punish me." It was an act of breathtaking courage, a strategist's final, desperate gambit. She was trying to draw all the fire to herself, to sacrifice her own queen, to save the rest of the board. She knew her father viewed her as the cold, rational one. A transgression from her might be seen as a bizarre, intellectual folly. From Isabel, the romantic dreamer, it would be seen as a crime of passion, a far more heinous sin in his eyes. But her sacrifice was in vain. Beaumont was beyond reason. His rage was not just about one daughter, it was about the utter collapse of his authority. "You think me a fool?" he hissed, his eyes flicking between his 2 identical daughters. He saw not a noble sacrifice, but a coordinated deception. "You are both in on this. 2 vipers I have raised in my own house." He seized both of them by their upper arms, his grip like iron. He dragged them from the parlor, through the hall, and out onto the veranda. "You will both watch," he snarled, shoving them towards the railing. In the distance, by the great ancient oaks, torches burned, casting a hellish flickering light. They could see a group of men, and in the center a figure chained to the largest tree. It was Samuel. Finch stood nearby, holding a coiled leather whip. Isabel let out a strangled sob, collapsing against the railing. Ilara remained standing, her body rigid, her face a pale, frozen mask of horror. This was it. The consequence they had always known was possible, but had never truly let themselves believe could happen. "He will be made an example of," Beaumont grated, his face illuminated by the distant flames. "And then he will be sold down the river to the sugar fields, where he will work until his heart gives out. And you two," he turned to them, his face contorted with disgust, "will be confined to this house until I can marry you both off to the farthest, most miserable corners of this country. Your lives as you know them are over." He locked them in their separate rooms, leaving them with nothing but the sounds drifting up from the oaks, the sickening crack of the lash, the grunts of the men, and a terrible, defiant silence from the man they both loved. The reckoning had come, and it was more brutal and absolute than anything their worst fears had imagined. Confined to her room, Alara did not weep. Her terror and her grief were transmuted into a cold, diamond-hard rage. She listened to the awful sounds from the yard, each lash a blow against her own soul, and she knew that their pact could not end this way. It could not end with Samuel's destruction and their slow, living death. The final move on the chessboard had to be hers. She paced the length of her room, her mind working furiously, sifting through the architecture of the house, the routines of the staff, the weaknesses of her father's security. And then she remembered the old oil lamps. They had been replaced in the main rooms by newer, finer models, but a crate of the old, leaky ones was stored in the small attic space above her wing of the house. Her plan was desperate, chaotic, and suicidal, but it was a plan. She waited until the sounds from the yard had ceased, replaced by a tense, exhausted silence. She waited until she heard her father's heavy footsteps return to the house and retreat to his study, likely to fortify himself with brandy. Using the back of a hairbrush, she worked at the rusty lock on her door. It was old and seldom used, a relic of a time before her father's paranoia. With a final, sharp crack, the wood splintered and the door swung open. She crept into the hall and freed Isabel, who was huddled on her bed, catatonic with shock. "Isabel, listen to me," Ilara whispered, her voice a blade. "Weeping is a luxury we cannot afford. We have one chance. Are you with me?" Seeing the fire in her sister's eyes, Isabel's own despair was burned away, replaced by a flicker of hope. She nodded, her body trembling. Together they found Delphine in the darkened kitchen, her face etched with a grief as deep as their own. Before Ilara could even speak, the old woman looked at them and understood. "The North Smokehouse," Delphine said, her voice a low, urgent whisper. "It is full of cured hams. The grease will make the fire burn hot and fast. It is far from the main house, but the glow will be seen by all." It was Delphine who slipped out into the night and carried the message. Not to Samuel, who was now chained and broken in the holding shed, awaiting the morning transport, but to the other men and women of the quarters who looked to him as a leader. The message was simple: a fire in the north, a diversion. While Delphine was gone, the sisters worked. They retrieved the old, leaky oil lamps from the attic. They were a terrible fire hazard, perfect for their needs. They crept through the darkened house, their bare feet silent on the floorboards, and out into the night. They moved like wraiths through the gardens, staying in the deepest shadows, their hearts pounding in unison. When they reached the North Smokehouse, they could see figures melting back into the darkness. Delphine's message had been delivered. Help was waiting. With trembling hands, they unbarred the heavy door. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of hickory smoke and salt. They smashed the old lamps against the dry wooden walls and the greasy stacks of cured meat. Ilara pulled a small tinderbox from her pocket. She looked at Isabel, her twin, her other half, in the darkness. This was the consummation of their pact, not a whispered vow, but an act of fiery rebellion. She struck the flint. The spark caught, and a small flame bloomed. She touched it to a trail of spilled oil. The fire did not start. It exploded. A whoosh of sound and a wave of heat threw them backwards. The dry wood and grease ignited in a furious, hungry roar. Flames shot up into the night sky, turning the darkness to a terrifying, brilliant orange. Almost immediately, shouts erupted from the great house. Lights appeared. Men ran from the quarters, pointing and yelling. The diversion was perfect. All eyes, all hands were turned to the spectacular blaze that threatened to consume a valuable part of their master's wealth. In the chaos, two shadows detached from the running crowd and sprinted towards the holding shed. It was the stable master and another field hand, men loyal to Samuel. They broke the simple lock and half-carried, half-dragged him into the darkness of the woods. From a rise on the edge of the property, the sisters watched. They saw the confusion, the shouting, their father's apoplectic rage as he directed the futile effort to fight the fire. And then they saw it. A single figure, limping but moving steadily, disappearing into the vast, dark wilderness that bordered the Mississippi River. Samuel was free. His fate was uncertain, a desperate gamble on the long road north. But he had a chance. They had won. And they had lost everything. They did not try to run. There was nowhere for them to go. They walked back to the house, their faces smudged with soot, their eyes reflecting the flames of their rebellion. They met their father on the lawn. He looked from the roaring fire to his two daughters at their calm, defiant faces, and he finally understood the depth of their betrayal. The fire that night consumed the smokehouse, but it also burned down the world of Belle Reve. Samuel was gone, a ghost on the wind. The pact, born of a secret love, had been immolated in a desperate act of freedom. Ilara and Isabel were left in the ashes, stripped of their future, their inheritance, their honor. But they were no longer captives in a gilded cage. They were survivors of a war they had started, forever bound by the secret of the man they had both married, and the fire they had lit to set him free.